Hello, welcome back for another episode of Moms on a Mission with Julie Hatch. I am your host, Julie Hatch, and I'm glad that you're here today. We've got another really interesting guest for a really great episode today. So welcome back to the show. And who I have here today is a man named Steve Gardner. Steve Gardner is a Harvard graduate and an educator who has been there before and understands how frustrating the entire college admissions process can be. He helps teens successfully pursue the college of their dreams without sacrificing sleep, fun, or friends along the way. He believes that the world needs every student to reach their full potential, and college admittance should not hold them back. Before becoming a teacher, Steve was a personal development and high-performance coach. He created the Ivy League Challenge to help students and their parents understand that the best way to get into a top college is to find your core values, pursue your interests with genuine curiosity, and make an impact on your community. And he has founded his business, I guess, the ivyleaguechallenge.com. So welcome, Steve. Glad to have you here. Did I get that right? The ivyleaguechallenge.com is a good place to find you?
Yeah, that'll work. That's a great place. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Julie. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. I really hope that, you know, at some level, I'll be able to share something that can help relieve some of the stress for some of your listeners and just make this process a little more smooth and more successful for them.
Oh, I am sure that you can. I think that is a gift that you're bringing to parents and families, because it's a really stressful time of a kid's life, the application process, the waiting for the where to apply. Anyways, we can get into what the whole process is that you handle with, but I am going to start off with a question that I warned you about that I just want to dig in right away and say, as some of my listeners may be aware, that when I work with parents, I focus on what the child's inner essence is, their core, who they're all about, and not what society is trying to make them. And so I stress to parents that not all kids are meant to be Ivy Leaguers, and that stressing and pushing for something that isn't right for the child isn't good for anybody. Does that make sense to you?
Oh yeah, couldn't agree more. Absolutely. You know, that's where, if you look at the Gallup polls, and these are massive polls, 60,000, 80,000 people polled. So very statistically significant, and they're professionally written, professionally done. They're done to remove as much bias as possible. So this data is about as good as you're going to find as far as just, you know, raw, massive data. And in the workplace, we find that about 85% of professionals are somewhere on the disengagement spectrum, or somewhere between active sabotage of the company, and then that's at the very end, you know, the most disengaged employees, and then up to this, you know, the cutoff between engaged and, you know, less engaged or not fully engaged. And so that's 85% of the workforce. And where does that come from? Yeah, I know. That comes from people not feeling connected to their work and not feeling like they're respected or whatever. There's a number of issues there. Well, guess what the numbers are for teenagers and their level of engagement to disengagement at school. Once you hit 8th grade, so educators that are listening in are going to be familiar with this. There's the 5th grade slide and the 8th grade cliff. Okay, so 5th graders, students in 5th grade, begin to slide. They begin to care a little bit less about pleasing their teachers and doing things just because that's supposed to be done that way. And they sometimes begin to slide in their performance. But in 8th grade, we see what's called the cliff. And so from 8th grade to 12th grade, those students, about 85% of them are somewhere on the disengagement spectrum. Now, most of them are not like actively sabotaging the classroom and trying to get kicked out of school, although some of them are. Most of them fit in the meh, this is boring, or I don't get why we have to do this, and they're just not engaged in their schoolwork. So where does that disengagement come from for teens? Well, I believe that teens hire school to accomplish a job, right? Teenagers. So this language, by the way, it comes from Clayton Christensen. He's a Harvard Business School professor, and his theory around, it's called jobs theory. Is this idea that we don't buy products. We hire products to do a job for us. And
Yeah.
so he says, look, students, teenagers, they're not hiring school to do school. They're hiring school to gain confidence, to feel like they're progressing and gain confidence. And number two, to have time with friends. And so if school is not providing that for them, then they'll fire school and find something else that can do that for them. And sometimes they find sports. And some people do very well in sports because they feel successful and they spend time with friends, or they do theater or debate or other activities, right? But some don't find success in those ways. And they might kick themselves out of school or find a way to get kicked out and join a gang where they can feel confident and build friends, spend time with friends. Or they may not like that violent lifestyle or whatever, and maybe they tune out and tune into gaming, where they can feel confident that they're growing in their video game prowess and they're spending time with friends. And whatever the case is, that time of their life, they need, one, to feel like they're progressing and they're learning something, they're growing. And two, friends are really, really important. So if school is not accomplishing those two things, then they're going to fire school and they're going to hire video games or sports or something else, a gang or drugs or something else to fill those needs for them. Yeah. So if as a parent and if the school, if on these sides, everyone is converging on the teenager and saying, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this, because I know what's best for you. Yeah. You need to get into this school, or you need to do these things so that you can get to that school. What are we doing? We're taking away that kind of that internal drive that teenagers can develop through building confidence by progressing each day in different ways, by developing skills, etc., and spending time with their friends. Yeah. And so, yeah, no, I'm 100% with you. And that's just, the jobs to be done, the jobs theory from Clayton Christensen, that's just one of the reasons why I'm completely on board. Our children, their job is not to live our dreams. Yeah. And so our role is to help them understand their core values, help them understand what brings them to life, and find ways to support them in that. And when they are connected to their drivers, to their core values, they're going to shock you at how much they come alive. And also, and by come alive, I mean, they'll start engaging in life. They'll start learning. They'll start growing. They'll start asking questions. You think your teenager is bored and doesn't want to talk to anyone? They're just disengaged. Yeah. They're disengaged. Engage them and just watch what happens. And they'll surprise you. They'll absolutely shock you.
I totally get that. I completely agree. And I totally get that. And I think that teenagers are misunderstood a lot of the times. So I love your phrase of finding their core values, pursue interests with real curiosity and impact on your community, but really the core values and genuine curiosity. How do you tell parents to engage their kids? Do you have a recipe or a program, or how? I'm sure there are a lot of parents who say, yeah, I'd love to engage my kids, and they don't want to hear what I have to say or whatever. Do you have any tips on how to get your kid engaged in whatever?
Well, yeah, I mean, parents are at a disadvantage. Parents are just at this natural disadvantage because teens naturally want to try to find their own way just during that phase of life, right? And so, yeah, it's going to be harder for a parent to do than for an outsider, right? A basketball coach or a drama, director, a debate coach might be able to get through to a teenager much, much easier than a parent. And I say might almost tongue in cheek, like 100% of the time, right? But I have a program, an online course. It's called the Ivy League Challenge. And in that course, what we do, I guess let's take one step back and let's understand where all of the stress around college admissions is coming from. Yeah. Because a part of this is just bad information, bad advice that parents have been getting and in turn passing on to their teenagers. And that bad advice is just really stressful. Here's, for those who are listening in, if you have asked around and you have found out how people get into a top tier school, the advice is going to be the same all the way around the world. There's going to be 4 things. They're going to tell you, number 1, take the most rigorous classes that your high school allows and do well in those classes, get nearly straight A's. Number two, take and retake, get tutors if you need to, whatever you need to do to get near perfect scores on standardized tests, either SAT or ACT. Number three, you're going to need to demonstrate leadership in as many ways as possible. So extra points if you're both an athlete and a musician and in student council, and you can demonstrate leadership in all those areas, then you get extra points, but the more the better. And number four, develop some kind of standout factor, some kind of wow factor or X factor or some kind of spike, if you're familiar with that word. But it's the idea is become nationally competitive in like science Olympiad or math competitions, or get published in a national publication so that your English writing, your composition is fantastic. That's the advice that everyone's going to give you. And those of you who are listening who have actually asked around, you might be laughing or crying or both, because what I'm saying is true. Like 100% of the time, this is what you're going to hear.
Yep.
And I'm sorry, that advice is horrible. It's absolutely terrible, terrible advice. Coming from, I did get a degree at Harvard, and I've spent a lot of time talking to students and kind of figuring out their path to Harvard, but I've also spoken directly with the admissions officers, literally the people who decide who gets in and who gets out and who doesn't. And I've gone beyond Harvard. I've talked to these admissions officers at Yale and at Dartmouth, and I've spent time at New Penn. I've also talked to parents of the teens that got in and that didn't. And I've spent a lot of time, and I understand this process. And believe me, that those 4 steps is a terrible, terrible strategy. Here's why. Number one, it's exhausting. Okay, that strategy is going to take out, unbelievable perseverance and grit and self-determination and discipline. And you might be hearing all of those adjectives and thinking, well, that sounds great. I want my child to develop grit and self-determination and everything else. And you do. There's nothing wrong with that. Believe me, you'll need those things anyway. But at that level, to push yourself to do all of that, you are going to sacrifice sleep. You are going to sacrifice fun and friends. You're going to put everything you have into getting those 4 things done.
Yeah.
And we're not being honest about the true price of that sacrifice.
Yeah, very true.
When you are a teenager, not only is your body still growing, and we grow during sleep, like it is so critical to get good sleep while your body is growing and developing, or you literally stunt your growth. But guess what? Your brain continues to develop, especially the prefrontal cortex, until about 25 in boys and about 25 in girls and 28 in boys. Mm-hmm. Like we're talking about, as 16-year-old or 15-year-old teenagers, we're talking about a long ways to go before you've got a fully developed brain. So and true. That same brain development happens in your sleep. We already know from sleep scientists at UCLA, the Sleep Study Center at UCLA, that's just phenomenal. And their work with Stanford and all the stuff that they've done on sleep science, we know that your cognitive awareness is about the same as someone who is drunk when you're chronically sleep deprived. Yeah. And that goes for teenagers, it goes for parents, it goes for every age group. And so if we are asking teenagers to sacrifice their sleep, we're stunting their brain growth, probably their body growth, and we're asking them to learn things and remember things and apply things and think deeply and develop the prefrontal cortex, which is where all of your emotional intelligence, your self-efficacy, your empathy, all of those critical thinking, problem solving, all of that deeper thinking happens in the last area to develop, right? And we're stunting the development of that area, like the thing that is required to do well to get into these top tier schools. Because sleep is the thing that we have to give up because we have to do all this stuff, right? Yeah. So the price is way bigger than we realize. Giving up sleep is a lot. And giving up fun and friends is more than we realize too. One of my favorite, most impactful classes at Harvard was a design thinking class, where we learned that creativity is, honestly, it is the spark of so much success. Uh-huh. And all of that kind of creative thinking. What's the best way to think creatively? It is to stop and breathe in between all of the rigor and the focus, stop and breathe, and also play. Find
Yeah.
time to play. And if you don't have kind of a rhythm of focus and then and recovery and focus and recovery that is broken up by play, legitimate, honest, heartfelt, like full engaged play, then we are cutting ourselves short. We're cutting our knees out from under ourselves because we're taking away the creativity and the out of the box problem solving thinking that's available. All right, so in other words, the things we're giving up to get all that stuff done is pretty costly. But that's just the first reason why this is a bad idea. The second is even a bigger deal. Okay, the second gets back to your point. What are we telling the teenagers here? Think about this for just a second. What are we telling them? We're saying, you know what? What's important to you doesn't matter. You aren't good enough with your core values as you are, but this person over here, they got into that school, so they're clearly good enough. So instead of you being you, pretend to be that guy, and maybe you can trick the admissions officer. I mean, really, that's what we're saying.
It's right.
Don't follow your passion. Don't follow your guiding principles and your core values. That's not good enough. It's not going to get you in. So pretend to be someone else. Create the facade of someone better than you, and you've got a chance.
Such a bad message.
Wow. Yes. If there were no other reasons not to follow the strategy, that's enough not to follow the strategy. To say that you're not good enough as you are, and that you need to follow someone else's template, you need to pretend to be someone else, is just a price that I'm not willing to pay. And I don't think any parent, when they realize that that's what's happening, I don't think any parent it feels good about that.
Right.
But here's the kicker. Here's the third reason, and that's the last one. The third reason that this is a really bad advice is because Harvard or MIT or Stanford, whatever your dream school is, they are not looking for 2,000 clones of that person that we just described.
Yeah.
That's the last thing that they want. That's the last thing they want. They're not looking for 2,000 identical types of people. They want a rich, diverse class, this amazing banquet of all kinds of food. And they don't want 2,000, potato dishes that are all the same potato dish.
Yeah.
They want rich, diverse backgrounds and students and people and ways of thinking and core values and interests and strengths. They want tremendous diversity so that everything can come together and create the ultimate banquet, the ultimate buffet, right? Where anyone can benefit because of the other people there. So what is the true key to getting in? It's not all that stuff that someone else did and they got in. Great, they did that, but they were hopefully, some people do fake their way in, and then I've seen those people on campus and they have terrible imposter syndrome issues, and they're spending a lot of time in the counseling center at Harvard, and some of them drop out.
Yep.
But most of the time, the admissions officers are good enough at catching the people who follow that strategy and not admitting them.
Yeah.
That most of the people who get in are not people who do all those things that we described, the 4 steps that everyone says to do.
Yep.
Instead, who are the people getting in? A lot of them are people who say, well, I didn't expect to get in. I'm shocked. Harvard wasn't really on my radar. I was just really, really interested in this thing. And so here's what happens. Instead, what I teach my students, once they realize that this is a broken strategy, I teach them, look, you get in by being so authentically you, and by being the best version of you, the version of you that other people want to have on their campus. You get in because you don't need Harvard to follow your passions and follow your interests. You have proven that you can follow your interests to such a degree that you're going to be successful with or without Harvard. And you don't need Harvard to be the key to your future success. And once you don't need Harvard, you're way more likely to have Harvard be interested in you.
Yeah.
Harvard is much, much more interested in someone who doesn't care if they go to Harvard or not than someone who believes that their whole life depends on getting admitted. Okay, so what do? You spend the time that you need to learn your core values, understand what really drives you. Take the time that you need to understand what your passions are, understand more about your strengths, and understand what kinds of skills would be useful to develop in order to continue pursuing your interests and your strengths. That's the first step. Understand yourself a lot better. And self, awareness is not something that comes naturally to teenagers.
Right.
Like we talked about earlier, your prefrontal cortex is just starting to develop. But beyond that, teenagers have grown up in a school system that I'm sorry, I'm a teacher and I love teaching, and I don't bash the school system. That's not my message at all. But I do know that it's almost impossible for a teacher to create a unit that says, you tell me how I should judge this, right?
Yeah.
You tell me based on your core values how I should judge your skill acquisition, right? Your ability to master these ideas that are important for this unit.
Yeah.
It's really difficult for a teacher to be able to do that. And also, very few teachers know what their core values are, right? Very few adults, if you look around, very few adults have spent time to understand truly what drives them. And that's why 85% of adults are disengaged at work, right?
Yeah.
That's why, so very few adults know it. So therefore, it's very unlikely that it's been passed on to teenagers. Then teenagers have grown up in a system that is standardized, that kind of pulls away and doesn't really value individual core values. And what that leads to is a situation where teens probably don't know their core values.
Right.
They know some of their interests, they know some of their strengths, and that's a clue, but you spend some time helping them understand their core values. And I go through, a series of visualizations, of thought exercises, et cetera, to kind of help them understand what their core values are.
So that's one thing that you do is help with this. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So like the first module in the Ivy League Challenge is the Ivy League Health Challenge. And that is this is the whole idea that, so we always think that doing something radical and crazy is what makes us great. What makes people great is the common sense stuff that they because for most people, common sense is not common practice.
Right.
But if you can be uncommonly consistent with common sense things, then you become great. It's like the quote, I don't remember who said this, but a quote that I've heard before that I love is this idea that you don't decide your future. You decide your habits, and your habits dictate your future, right? So if you can be uncommonly consistent with the common sense stuff that breeds success, that actually gives you the compound effect, because you make those things habits and then you don't have to think about it again, right? And all the Stanford work that they've done, Kelly McGonigal and Aaliyah Crum and their work on the subconscious and how much of our day, they estimate it's around 60% of our waking hours are spent in total subconscious, total unfocused awareness. 60% shocks me. That's a number that boggles my mind. But if 60%, if it's even close, if it's 30%, if it's 30% of my day that is dictated by my subconscious habits, the triggers and the routines that I have formed, then what would happen if I intentionally created more effective habits? And I intentionally created those habits so that they were stuck on a loop, so that I was doing healthier things unconsciously and just making better decisions as a result. Yeah. Right? The compound effect of not having to think about the things that are good for you is just outrageous. It's the eighth wonder of the world. It's absolutely amazing. Yep. So module 1 is all about, it's called the Ivy League Health Challenge. And we get into very, very simple things, adding 3 minutes of focus time at the beginning of your day, a few minutes at the end of the day, will radically change your effectiveness throughout the entire day. I teach them how to be more productive with the time that they are focusing on studies, how to eliminate common study mistakes, and just be a better overall, to develop those skills that allow them to be successful at getting good grades in school, because actually that is important. Yeah. Right. So that's module 1, and then module 2 and 3, so 4 full weeks, and we're still not into the impact project. That whole time is core values. And it really does take, a lot of guided effort for teens to figure out who they are and why they are, why they're driven this way. So we take a lot of time to do that. And then once you understand your core values, one of the exercises that I have all of my students do is interview 6 people that know them well, including parents, teachers, friends, etc., and find out the 3 words that all these 6 different people would use to describe them at their best, right? When I'm at my best, what 3 words describe me? And then I have the students pick their own 3 words, and this is a whole activity. They go into breakout rooms and they talk to other peers in the Ivy League Challenge, and share their 3 words and what surprised them. They're always blown away and flattered, by the way. And it's such a confidence booster to talk to people and hear these words, hear how people describe you at your best. But anyway, besides the confidence boost and the ego boost, which is wonderful, they begin to have a little bit more self-awareness and a little bit of aspirational awareness. Like they kind of know what they want to aspire to become. And once they come up with their 3 words, we have a series of exercises to kind of ingrain those 3 words into their daily habits so that the compound effect continues to build on them. And I add to them, so they have their own 3 words that they choose, and I ask everyone to add 1 word. Okay, so they all need 4. And that 4th word is curious. If you're going to stand out to a college admissions officer, you need to demonstrate curiosity. Okay, and I almost want to add another one, thoughtful, right? Because you need to demonstrate curiosity and thoughtfulness. But I kind of tie it in, right? So I teach them, once you understand your values, your interests, your strengths, then I teach them, how do you ask better questions? How do you become the journalist? How do you become the investigator, right? Because you think at 15, you think you know what your core values are, you think you know what your strengths are, and you think you understand how the world works in a lot of different arenas. But if you start asking better questions, you're going to learn a lot more than if you assume you already know. Okay, so take the thing that you love, take the thing that you're good at, that you're interested in, that's aligned with your core values, and start being the journalist. Start being the investigative journalist. Ask questions, find out who the experts are, find out what they're doing, find out the problems in this area, find out what people are doing to solve those problems, find out what the contradictions are, everything, right? And spend time being curious. And then once you identify a problem within, so you're going to get to a level of expertise, a level of awareness that is uncommon in a teenager. Because you stay curious, because you ask questions rather than assume answers, right? And you keep pursuing. And I give them templates to be able to reach out to professionals. And a lot of teenagers don't know how to write emails. And so I give them, templates and to-do checklists and what not to do, to-dos and not to-dos, and do's and don'ts, and things like that for email outreach. And I teach them how to research which professors are studying or researching the thing that you're interested in, which companies are doing things in this area, which governments have policies that are affected by or that affect your thing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? And as they explore and reach out to people, because they're asking intelligent questions, university professors and politicians and professionals will reply to those emails. I've seen it happen over and over again. They have no idea that the kid is 13 years old or 14 years old. The questions that are being asked and the way that the email is written, it looks like an adult, at the very least a graduate student or something like that. And you start collaborating with professors and with professionals, and then you identify a problem in your community that, because you've become a bit of an expert in this area, you know how that problem is being solved somewhere else, and you know what the resources are, and you begin making your impact in your community. Okay. So a really quick example. I know I've been dragging this out.
This is great.
But okay, so a really quick example. I have a student, 14 years old, and I should have saved that for the very end, because she knew. So before the Ivy League Challenge, she was spending all of her time and all of her effort on science and math Olympiad competitions. That was what she believed was going to help her stand out. And very quickly in the Ivy League Challenge, she realized that's a terrible strategy. But she knew she loved science, and she had core values around environmental sustainability. And she had no idea where it would lead. She started in one area and ended up in food waste. Okay?
Oh,
As she asked better and better questions, she realized how big of a deal food waste is in her community and what a terrible impact it has on the environment. And she had done all this research and found out that in the UK, that new policies were proposed. And when those policies were adopted, food waste went down significantly. It was a very successful initiative that happened there. So she reaches out with these templates. She finds the professionals and elite professors at these elite universities, some in the United States, some in the UK, and she starts collaborating. And she says, I want to do that in my country, right? And so there is a proposal that is almost finished. The draft is almost finished, professionally written, ready to be sent to the government. The first name on that proposal is this 14-year-old girl's name. And it is followed by a dozen PhD and professors on that an initiative to change the laws in her country. And we don't know what's going to happen. That proposal is about to be sent in, but she's 14 and she's got 2 more years between now and the time that she applies to her dream schools, which are these top tier schools, right? Yep. And so between now and then, who knows where this is going to go, but she knows how to ask questions. She knows how to network. She knows how to do outreach. And she knows how to, once she is collaborating with professionals and with professors, she knows how to continue contributing in a way that makes it worth their time. Yep. So she's doing amazing work. She's getting support from people who have the credibility to talk to the government. And she's making an impact, a very real impact on her community. And so when her teachers write letters of recommendation, those are going to be some special letters of recommendation. And if she applies to Yale, I know, for example, Yale requests, if you've done this kind of collaboration with a professor, they request an extra letter of recommendation only in that one circumstance. They do not want extra letters in any other circumstance, but they want to know if you've collaborated with a professor in some science experiment or some rigorous academic work. They want to hear from the professor what your role was, how you contributed. They want to know what your level of understanding is. Did you just pay $10,000 to join a team and get your name on the paper? Or are you an active contributor? They want that letter of recommendation from that professor. And the professors are thrilled to write it. They know that that's coming, right? So she's going to have this amazing, amazing application that stands out. And she quit her science Olympiads and her math Olympiads, and she will not have that on her application. She'll have something far more compelling instead.
That is a great, great story. I would have to say, though, that I think that can't be your typical person that works with you. I would say, wow, my kid's not that smart, or my kid's not that I don't know how much brains goes into it, but how much motivation. There's got to be a ton of motivation, which I guess comes from the core values and the curiosity. But I just understand exactly what you're saying, but are there a lot of buts? But they're not motivated, but they're not that smart, but.
Yeah, well, sure. Everyone, including, this girl was more confident. If you're competing in, science competitions and math competitions, that's a different student than most students. That's going to be a top, 5%, top 10%. But I have equally impressive stories from students who were really scared to be in the Ivy League Challenge because they thought they were going to be surrounded by people who intimidated them. Yeah. So another student who is now already at Stanford, she loved economics, and gender equity was one of her core values. And it just drove her nuts that all of her economics textbooks had a male bias. All of the examples, all of the pictures were biased towards a male audience. And so once I began working with her and she understood this, this process, she sat down, she collaborated with some professors actually, and she sat down and wrote an economics 101 textbook for middle school students. So it's an intro to the intro. So it's more basic stuff. but she spent months putting that together. It was good enough to publish, and she distributed it to about a dozen different schools in California in her area there before she applied to Stanford, where she was accepted. She was admitted to Stanford.
Yeah.
You know, a parent, and not every student begins the Ivy League Challenge and figures out where they're going to go with this within 2 months or 3 months. Some of them take longer. There are other buts. There are some big ones. If your student is too busy, if the teenager is too busy, it's like trying to start a fire when all of the combustibles are so compressed that there's no oxygen anywhere. You're not going to get a fire going. You have to create space in the schedule. And so one of the things I do with all of my students is I take them through an audit. And once they realize that those extra activities are not helping them, they're happy to let them go. And so replacing activities that aren't helping you with a singular focus around something that truly drives you, that gets you excited, it's a game changer, right? Now you're spending your time that's not in school doing schoolwork, you're spending it doing things that bring you to life and get you excited. That gives you a little bit more energy to focus on your schoolwork, versus you're spending your time doing the extra activities because you think that's what's going to get you into school, into college, because you think that's impressive. And so you're exhausted by the time you get to school, and you try to survive school, and then you have to go to your activities. Terrible way to do this, even if you can make it work, right?
And I bet you that you also, just having a teen work with you, you are that, as we talked about at the very beginning, an outsider. You're not a parent telling them what they would benefit.
Makes a huge difference.
It does make,
and especially if they have any, kind of, because I did get a degree from Harvard. Sometimes that really helps. Students are, so tell us more about Harvard. They love some of those stories, and that helps with some of them, but not all of them. I do want to say one more thing that is highly related to kind of your theme at the beginning and the way you introduced the discussion. Honestly, if I had a teenager who was not interested in college, wanted to drop out of high school, and I mean, we're not talking about Ivy League schools. We're not talking about top 100 schools. We're talking about doesn't want to go to college. How would I hope, if I was their parent, how would I hope they spend their remaining teenage years? In all honesty, I would hope that they do the Ivy League Challenge, that they begin to understand why they hate school so much. It's because they're not tied to their core values. They do the personal development and the self-awareness work to understand what their core values and their interests and their strengths really are. They discover that gaming and drugs or alcohol and other high-risk activities, et cetera, or binge watching Netflix or social media, that all of these are actual escape tools. Because you're not engaging in life, you feel like you need to escape from life because you hate school, you hate whatever. Once teenagers realize that those behaviors are not bringing them any joy, they're only escape mechanisms. And it can take some time to get through to a teenager, to help them understand that this is an escape mechanism.
And it probably doesn't feel that good. Well, it probably doesn't feel that good to them either. Oh
no.
It doesn't feel
stay
good.
Up till 4 a.m. watching Netflix or scrolling social media, and you wake up with a headache, and then the next night, eventually you try alcohol, and then you try drugs, and whatever it is. Every child is different, but that disengagement is it packs a harder punch than we realize. When you're disengaged from life, you try to find ways to numb the frustration or to escape from it, right? So once they understand that they're trying to escape because they're not engaged in life, and that they can engage if they'll do the work to understand their core values, then that's the first huge shift. Then once they develop the skill to ask better questions and be an investigative journalist, as long as they're doing investigative journalism in the area or the arena, the industry that they're interested in, then it's going to enliven them. It's going to engage them and charge them instead of draining them. And so once you've done that, then you begin working to do outreach and to collaborate with professionals and people who are better than you at what you're trying to do. And then you start solving a problem in your community and developing all the problem solving skills and and the resilience that comes when you fail and have to be reflective, figure out why you failed and what you can do differently, and all of that. I mean, that's exactly what you need to succeed without college.
Right, right.
It just so happens that that's also what you need to be impressive to the people who decide who gets into the top colleges.
Yeah.
So it's preparation for life.
Yep.
The top universities are hoping to find people who are going to be so successful that they bring honor and money and fame and glory back to the university after they graduate.
Right.
So how do you know who's going to do that? Well, the best predictor of future success is probably past success.
Yep.
So if you are already solving problems in your community, if you're already collaborating with professionals, then you're highly likely to take those skills that you're already developing. And once you get to Harvard, I mean, from personal experience, I can tell you the resources are shockingly, unbelievably, I mean, they're amazing.
Yeah.
And so combine that problem solving ability and an engagement level and drive with the resources and the networks of support that are available at these top tier universities. And you're probably going to go do some really cool things. And that's what the university is hoping to find, is a group of 2,000 students that is going to work together and get along really well and leverage the activities and the resources that are available on that campus to become better people. And I can speak from experience at Harvard. We spend so much time talking about our kind of duty to society and how our job is to make the world a better place. And it's not just talk. Like, this was such a point of emphasis in every single class, almost every single class, such a point of emphasis. It's not just lip service. The people trying to decide who gets admitted into these schools are really trying to figure out who's going to go and make the world a better place. That's who we want on our campus.
I think that you're making the world a better place with the Ivy League Challenge. I love this whole program that you're talking about, because in essence, it is exactly, even though I came out saying not everybody needs to be a Ivy Leaguer, it's what you're talking about. Every child, even before teen, especially before teen, but teenage, everybody could use what you're talking about. Everybody, everybody needs it. And not just about college, but about life. Like you say, it's applicable just to living. I think it's great.
I really appreciate that. It is my impact project. I come to life when I see teenagers get inspired.
Yeah.
And I felt that way in the classroom. And now I do the Ivy League Challenge full time because it's just, there's so much more, right? My impact is so much greater by working with teens who want to figure this stuff out than it is just being a classroom teacher, even though I sometimes I really miss the classroom, and I do. But yeah, that's my impact project, right? This is my mission.
Awesome.
Is to kind of drive this home for people.
I'm going to spread this word too, because I just completely believe in what you're doing. And you, I am sure you are right now located in Singapore, but I imagine that you work with kids from all over the world, or can work from kids. It doesn't matter because it's all remote or virtual.
Yeah, most of my students are in the US and Canada.
Yeah.
Then, there's a lot from all over.
Yeah.
My cohort that's finishing now has someone from Morocco, the Philippines, China, India, United States, Singapore. Is that it? Canada.
That covers a lot of.
Anyway, yeah, there's a lot of people from rich, diverse backgrounds.
Yeah.
Speaking of that.
So location doesn't matter. Yeah.
That's right. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. This is so good. Well, I think, Steve, we're going to wrap up here. Is there anything else that you would like to add? That's just been loaded with inspiration, information, helpful stuff. I had other things I was going to ask you, and it really doesn't matter, because what you said is really what's so important. And that's the key stuff. But do you have anything else that you want to say before we?
Thank you so much. I do think it's just so important, and I hope that my mission is compelling. So I'm happy to hear that it's compelling for you.
Absolutely.
I will say that I do also have a podcast, if I can put a shameless plug in.
Absolutely.
Because especially for families that can't afford to join the online course, I try very hard to give. It's very difficult to duplicate what we do in a cohort. into a podcast, but I do my best.
Yeah.
And so the Ivy League Prep Academy podcast is that podcast, and the URL, or the mini URL to get there a little faster, is TILC for the Ivy League Challenge, tilc.to/podcasts. And then the Ivy League Challenge, if someone is interested and wants to sign up for a cohort, TILC, the Ivy League Challenge.to/waitlist. And so right now the cohorts are full, but we are opening up. We try to open a new cohort about once a month. Sometimes we even open 2 in a month based on what we need. But you just go to the wait list and then reach out to me directly if you have. I do have people all the time that reach out because they feel like their situation is unique. And I'm more than happy to meet with your team before we begin the cohort, meet with you and the team together. I would say, I don't know, a third of the students that end up in the cohorts, we have at least 1 and sometimes 3 or 4 meetings before classes even begin, just to kind of to resolve whatever the issues are of the student that is participating. Oftentimes they need to fast track things because they're already a junior. Most of my, the Ivy League Challenge works a lot better if you're in grade 9 or grade 10. Grade 8 is still ideal. Before that, maybe, depending on how mature the team is. But once you're in grade 11, you don't have a lot of time to do all that stuff that I just described. So a lot of clients just reach out to me, email, I do my very best. To me, I do, this is what I do professionally, but it is so much more than a job. It is the reason I wake up. It is, I'm excited to start the day every day. I absolutely love inspiring your teenagers. So if you think I can help, reach out and we'll see what we can do.
I can feel your passion. I'm sure everybody else can feel your passion too. That's all right. Well, then we're going to wrap this up. That's Steve Gardner from tilc.to, or I found you also by the ivyleaguechallenge.com.
That's right.
But anyways, thank you so much, Steve. This has been a wonderful time listening to you, and good luck. I guess if you have a waiting list that you're don't need a whole lot of well-wishing luck, but anyways, good for you. I'm so glad that you're doing what you're doing. It makes the world a better place, and it makes life easier for parents and for kids, and that's just a gift to everybody. So thank you. We're gonna tune out, check out now, but thank you for listening to this episode, and come back next week for my next episode of Moms on a Mission that you've been listening to with Julie Hatch.